attended a talk recently in which Dianne Sherman shared her near-death experience. Her talk was compelling and moved the audience very deeply. I had some questions for her, and she consented to this interview.
My name is Dianne Sherman, and I want to share information about my near-death experience, which happened in 1981. And in 1981, I had gone into the hospital to have an arthroscopic procedure on my left knee. And it was a very sort of straightforward experience, not life-threatening in any way, not challenging in any way. And I had no fear or anxiety about having the experience. When I went in that day, I was very hopeful that the outcome would be straightforward and wonderful, and I had waited 10 years to have the experience since I'd had an accident. And so I remember being in the hallway that morning on the gurney, waiting to go into surgery, and really being cold, just racking with cold. And I've since understood that experience on a different level, but at the time I had had a pre-op shot, but I wasn't in surgery yet. And I remember going into the surgery suite, and one of the nurses was kind enough to give me this wonderful warm blanket, and that seemed to calm my body down, and I just went out. Before I went under, I was already gone. And I remember waking up in recovery, and there was a lot of commotion going on in the bed next to me in recovery, and I was sort of curious as to what was going on with the person next to me, but I kind of didn't want to know, but did want to know at the same time. And as I'm looking over at them and I'm seeing the doctors and the nurses working on this person, I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot going on here, and I'm kind of wondering what it is, but it's a curiosity that had no energy to it. It was just something that someone was experiencing, and it was outside of my realm, but because they were so close, I was paying attention, and I was watching them moving back and forth and around this person who was to my left. And I heard one of them speaking to the patient and saying their name. And I realized they were talking about me. And I thought, well, this is so strange. How can this possibly be them talking about me when I'm right here, you know? And so now I'm really kind of curious, and I'm saying to who's ever standing closest to me, excuse me, I heard my name, but I'm right here, and I'm fine. I don't understand. And they're not paying any attention to me, and I'm thinking, well, they're probably involved with what they're doing, and so they're not hearing what I'm saying. And the next thing I realized is that I have moved now to the foot of this person's bed, and I'm looking dead on at them while everybody's sort of working on this patient. And I realize as I'm looking at this patient that it's me. And I don't have any fear about it. I'm just sort of not understanding, how could that possibly be me when I'm here, but I'm seeing myself there. And I'm watching and I'm paying attention, and the next thing I realize is I'm now floating up into the corner of the room, and I'm now looking down on me in this bed with people working on me. And I'm thinking, how curious is this? How can I possibly be viewing myself from this angle? I don't understand what's happening. But yet I didn't have any fear. I didn't have any anxiety. I was just sort of mesmerized by it, but not overwhelmed by it. And in retrospect, I'm wondering how the brain, the mind, handles seeing all of this and not being terrorized by it at the same time. And I wasn't. I had no ill feelings. And as I was contemplating that and watching what was going on to this person who's directly in front of me, I'm feeling this energy pulling me out and away from this room. And as I'm moving out, I'm seeing this blackness that I'm now moving towards. And it's surrounding everything I can visually see is just blackness. And as a child, I had a lot of fear of being in the dark and not being able to see any street lights or any light in the room at all. And so this was really big for me to see this blackness in front of me, and there were no other cues around that I could find. And I kept feeling this push into this blackness, and I just remember felt like arching my body to kind of try to pull back from it, but it just kept moving me forward. And as I moved forward, I could feel a lightening inside of myself. And I just kept looking and searching in this blackness for something to hang on to, some glint of something that felt comfortable and all right. And as I'm sort of straining to see what there is for me to see, I see this little tiny glimmer of light in the distance. And as I'm looking at that glimmer and focusing more and more on it, it starts to grow. And as it starts to grow, I can't take my attention off of it because it's what I'm drawn to now. I'm drawn to this little tiny glimmer that's out there that's growing. And as it grows and starts to encompass more of the space where the darkness was, I'm feeling this pulling me forward into it. I'm no longer feeling this from behind. I'm feeling this pull from in front of me into this glimmer of light. And all of a sudden it starts to grow, and everything is illuminated in this light, including me. And I'm overwhelmed by the feeling of being in this light. It's everything I can see is the light and the feeling of it. And in that moment, as I'm looking, the light starts to separate. And I'm going forward through the light. And it's as if I'm floating with this separation of light. It's like walls of illuminated light, a brilliance I had never seen in my life, and a feeling of such joy and overwhelming ecstasy being in this illumination of light. And as I'm moving forward, in front of me there appears 2 rows, one on either side of me, of these hooded beings. And having been raised Catholic, my connection to the visuals of them made them look like they were in monk's robes with hoods, and they were brown robes. And there was no sense of anything except floating in between them, and this overwhelming sense of completeness, cherishness. It's not a real word, but feeling cherished, unconditional love, coming home. It was like coming home. And as I'm feeling these feelings, one of these beings steps forward, the one on the end on the left steps forward, and he speaks to me. And I'm saying he because he felt male, he felt fatherly, he felt protective, he felt caring and kind and loving. And I just felt this sense of connection to him when he spoke to me. A sense of love I had never experienced in my life, a sense of coming home to the very depths of myself, a sense of I am cherished to the very core of my being. I had never felt that kind of love ever. And as he's speaking to me, he says to me, "You can't stay. You have to go back. You have a child." And in that moment, my mind is going crazy, saying, I have just found this incredible sensation, this divine experience. I feel like I've never felt in my whole life, and I'm being told I can't stay. And in that moment, all I can do is say, no, I have to stay. You can't send me back. I'm finally home. I'm finally feeling the connection I had always yearned for in my life, that I thought would come through marriage, through a child, through family, through work that I love. But there was nothing in my life experience that could even come close to this sensation. It was that profound. It was that blissful. And he's repeated to me, "You cannot stay. You must go back. You have a child." And I'm thinking about my child, and I'm thinking, who would take care of her if I didn't go back? Because my parents were both dead. My ex-husband, I didn't feel was the right one for her. And my sister was still alive, but I didn't feel that she had the ability to care for my daughter in an appropriate way. And as I'm thinking about who could love and take care and be there for my daughter, I'm realizing that there's no one. And in that moment that I had that realization, I was back in my body. And then I woke up. And when I awakened, I was in my hospital room. I was out of recovery. And there was this sense that something had happened to me, but I didn't know what. I just felt changed. And I was somewhat befuddled in that moment, coming from having anesthesia and having had this experience. And I realized that I had been gone a long time as far as being in recovery. I was in recovery for over 3 hours, and this was supposed to have been a very simple surgery. And there was no explanation as to what had happened and what had transpired for me. All I knew was that my surgery was successful. There was a lot more damage supposedly that they had to repair, and yet I wasn't in any state of pain. And the woman who was in the hospital room next to me, who had a lot less surgery than I did or repair, was in severe pain and was struggling. And I realized after I knew what had occurred with me is that that was one of the gifts of having had the experience, was that I wasn't in pain, and I never became in pain. And they were able to have me up walking that night on crutches. And it was amazing. And I think it was amazing for the doctors, because they'd never seen anybody come through it so well or start to heal so quickly. And that was part of the gift. And from there, it took quite a while for me to realize what I had experienced, because there was no one at that time that I knew of who was talking about near-death experience. I didn't have access to books and authors that may have written at that time. We didn't have computers that were, that had Google and whatnot that you could look things up on. And I went through a series of experiences that started bringing the flashes back and the visions of it back. And I worked with mentors and healers and those who could teach me how to meditate to access those feelings and those remembrances. And also in meditating, I was able to connect back to Source in the same way, almost, that I had when I had the experience. And in those awarenesses, all of the pieces fell together and all of the memories came together. And it was many years before I had a full understanding of what had transpired with me. I came back with gifts of psychic ability that I hadn't had before. I became clairsentient and clairaudient and clairvoyant. And I was able to see people in their essence as opposed to in their facades. And it took me on a path of learning and discovery to know what to do with those gifts. And it has been an amazing experience for me to be able to translate for people the things that they don't know, that they want to know about themselves, to find the places in themselves that they're looking for, to understand the things that are blocking them from moving forward in their lives, and to guide them to that connection to their own heart. And I think my greatest joy in having had this experience is to let people know that we are cherished unconditionally, that there is no judgment on us in any way, that the universe loves us and is supporting us, and we are here to grow, yes, but it's about playing, it's about joy, it's about loving. It's not about fear, it's not about pain, it's not about judgment. Only those things were created by us and our ego. There isn't anything in reality other than love. And that is the gift, is that we are loved, and there's nothing to be afraid of on the other side. And there's nothing to be afraid of in living either. And I think that's my story, is live to your best ability, have the greatest joy that you can for yourself and others, know the connection that you feel in your heart, and make that the most important thing that you experience, and see everything through the eyes of Source, because in that way everything is love.
Dianne, did you have a heightened sense of clarity or awareness when you were having this experience?
Absolutely.
Tell us about it.
I felt connected to everything. I knew everything. It was like there wasn't anything outside of my awareness. I felt total clarity about everything, how everything worked, why it worked, what it was comprised of, what we were doing, why we were here, what it was all about. There was total clarity about everything and everyone.
Yeah. So you didn't feel the dulling effects of being anesthetized?
Oh, no, not at all. There was no sense of any anesthesia or any... I was in a totally different place than the body that had surgery.
Mm-hmm. You said it took you a while to recall what happened. Why do you suppose that was so? Why did it take you so long to assimilate and recall this?
I don't know. My guess is, for me, I don't know how others have experienced it really, but my guess is, for me, is that had I gotten it from the get-go, it might have been too big a shock. Everything that I've experienced in my life has been gentle in a way. There seems to be a mode of modus operandus that my life goes by, and even though I've had some big experiences in my life, they've all come at me in a gentle way. Mm-hmm. So I think I would have lost my mind had I gotten it immediately, because it was so out of my realm at that point.
It was too much to assimilate with what you knew reality to be.
Yes.
In a talk that you gave recently, you said that we choose what we're coming in to work on. In other words, you're trying to tell us that we reincarnate?
Absolutely. If we so choose.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a choice.
Yeah, and how did you learn this from the experience that you had?
Because in that moment in time, you get all the information. And one of the things that I realize is that we have soul groups, and as groups, there is a meeting of the minds about what the soul group wants to incarnate to work on, what is the life experience. And I've played that out in my life. I've seen it work.
So in other words, you're saying that we choose the people that we will meet in our lives?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
We choose because we have agreed before we've incarnated that we will be in each other's experiences in a certain way. I think it's similar to when you meet somebody and you, for the first time, and you think something very familiar about them. You know, you feel a comfort with them, and I think that's because they're part of our soul group.
Yeah. So Dianne, you said that you were in kind of an idyllic place. Why would you choose to come to a place, in other words, this world, in other words, waking up, why would you come to a place that is less than ideal?
Well, it's not that it's less than ideal, it's a different process. On the other side, you have such great love, but you don't have challenge in any way. You don't have the different experiences that we create for ourselves here. And you don't have that human quality that we have here that's so delicious when it's really good. We don't have that experience on the other side.
You said that we are God in spirit, and that our higher self is our connection to God.
We are God in human form.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And it is our spirit that is our connection, our conduit, our higher self to God or the universe.
But you didn't know this before you had this experience?
No, I did not. I always knew that we, having been raised Catholic, the understanding was we were created in the image and likeness of God. I didn't know that we were part of God. We were God in human form. God experiencing God's self.
Right. Now that could upset some traditionally religious people. So how did this set with you? How did you accommodate this insight into your life?
It was a challenge in the beginning because there is that sense of such reverence with God. How could I be a part of that? But having gone back and reread parts of the Bible and other religious texts, I realized that that is, to me, what God has always said to us. That's what Jesus was saying to us. Not that we were separate from Him, but that we were part of Him.
Yeah, I remember that in your talk recently you said that ego wants to separate from God. Can you tell us your understanding of what ego is?
Ego is the part of our brain that wants to be in control to protect us. And it has gone too far in that it separates us from, it wants to separate us from our connection to Source, to God. It wants to be the one in control, in charge. And our job is to lose our mind so we can step out of the ego and just have the connection which emanates from the heart.
I remember that Aldous Huxley, the great writer and philosopher, he said that, made a comment that our brains and our nervous system are like a reducing valve. In other words, that we are originally omniscient, but our awareness must be reduced in order to function in a three-dimensional world. Otherwise, that super consciousness would confuse us. Is that kind of what you're referring to when you said that you really had to take some time to process what you'd experienced?
Yes, because as was said, we do know everything. We've just forgotten. And somebody once told me that it's going through the birth canal that disconnects us. And I don't know how true that is, but I know that the desire to be connected with Source and to stay grounded in human form has been a challenge for all of us. And there's that fine line between being egotistical I'm all powerful, and that's what the ego battle is the ego thinks it doesn't need God. It's all powerful. And we have to trust that we are, in our hearts, a form of God, that it's our connection through love to God, and that the ego has no part in this, and not to listen to all the negativity. It's like when we pay attention to our brains, it's a stream of negativity coming at us most of the time. You'll never hear Spirit speaking that way to us. Spirit is only speaking out of love. It's only through heart connection.
You said that ego drops off when we cross over. Could
Yes.
you tell us a bit about how that could be?
Well, you're in spirit form on the other side. You're not in human form. Ego's part of the brain mechanism, in my understanding.
So what is it about the body that is involved with ego, or ego involved with body?
Well, the ego is running it, through the brain. The ego is trying to run the body, saying that the humanness is everything. You don't need God. You just need yourself.
Right. And so, I can't help but think that, in a way, having a near-death experience is cheating. In other words, the near-death experience seems to give the people who have it kind of a cosmic jump start over others who must die in order to learn how to live. So that's the feeling I get, that you've come back with insights that you would not have had if you hadn't been clinically dead.
I agree. I mean, that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who are having the insights without it. That was obviously the only way I was going to get the insights, was to have that experience. And I had come to a crossroads in my life before the experience where I had been asking for help because things were not going well in my life for a lot of reasons. And I felt very alone. And I remember being in church, and I don't know how far the timetable was between when I had gone to church, having this pleading session at the altar with God, but I think it was the only way I was going to find out that life was magnificent, that it wasn't what I thought it was, that there was a different way to experience it and a different mindset to have about it.
Yeah. Well, Dianne, that sounds like a perfect point in which to stop this interview, but can you think of anything else that you'd like to share with the audience about your near-death experience and what you've learned from it?
I think something that's important to know is that we came in as creators. We had an agenda, and the sooner we get to working on that, the more fulfilled we're going to be. And living life from your own creation, knowing that you can, even if you don't know how, trusting that leap of faith to create. Just go for those feelings and stop paying attention to the negative things around you that are burdensome to you. Pay attention to your heart and the things that you are wanting, the joy, the feeling, the love, the connection to creatures and people and all things wonderful. Pay attention to the things that give you joy, not to the things that you're afraid of and that you worry about. Mm-hmm. Trust in life.
Yeah. Okay, Dianne, thank you so much for sharing your experience with the audience.
Thank you.